Do you want a project car? Are you broke? Maybe you're just cheap. So am I. Don't worry. You're looking for a project car, you want the best bang for buck car that you could possibly get. Don't want to spend an arm and a leg, you want it to be versatile. Maybe you want to be able to drift it. Maybe you want to be able to take it to the track. Maybe you want to just slam it and have it look good. You gotta have something that fits the bill. And there's only one option that I could possibly think of that is cheap, reliable, affordable, looks good, and is versatile. And it's not a Miata. This is a BMW E46, and I think it is the best bang for buck car that you could possibly buy in 2024. Now I know what you're thinking. How could a JDM-loving dweeb like myself possibly think that this BMW is the best bang for buck car that you can buy? Now, why would I pick this car over any Japanese car, especially a Miata? Well, Miata is not always the answer anymore. Unfortunately, Miatas are getting a little bit more expensive. They're all kind of beat up, and normally I'd say Miata's pretty sick, but they're too out of budget for a lot of people. These cars, on the other hand, you can find all day for under $2,000. This car I picked up for $1,000 because the owner didn't want to put any more money into it. The back window was stuck down. There was paint marks all over the side. It was dirty, disgusting on the inside. The headlights were foggy, and it leaked oil. It leaked oil because it had 12 quarts of oil in it. 12 quarts. It had 12 quarts of oil in it. And it runs and drives still. Perfectly fine. If this was a Miata and you threw 12 quarts of oil into it, it would have gone kapoopies. But the Germans engineered shit kind of well. So this thing survived. It has 80,000 miles on it. That's pretty low for these, but I've seen these cars go all the way up to 300,000, no problems, just gotta maintain them. Flashback to my first project car. My first project car ever was a 2001 BMW 325i that I bought for $240 because it was basically totaled. The front end was mushed in, the rear driver's side door was ripped in half, the rear quarter panel was ripped in half, but it was a 2.5 liter straight six with a manual transmission. Ended up going absolutely crazy. I did everything in this car. I did an interior swap. It was the first time I bought coilovers, so I put fucking Racelands on it. I bought a welded diff. I bought parts cars, painted it twice, did all sorts of stuff to it, and then I ended up selling it to my buddy Ben, and he was gonna daily it. That lasted about a week, and then he immediately turned it into a drift car, and it was his drift car for 3 years, and he showed zero mercy. Absolutely beat on it, burnouts until the rims were banging off the ground, just not changing the oil enough, and he abused this car, and he sold it. He sold it, and it ran. It's still running. I know it's still running. I know who owns it now, and that car is still running. So these cars can take an absolute beating, and they take it. So the reliability thing, maybe the electronics, maybe it really depends on who owned your car last, where it was kept, but relatively straightforward cars, and they came with a buttload of options. When you hear E46, you obviously think M3. This is the same body year style as the E46 M3, legendary car. It was in Need for Speed. I remember that being the hero car of the game. It was super cool, and I always thought that those cars were very good. BMWs of that era have a sweet spot in my heart. Now, these cars came with an array of options. We had the M3, you've got the 323i, you've got the 325, the 328, the 330, and then you also have the XI models. Those are all-wheel drive. You could have gotten these cars with an automatic, which is what is in this car, unfortunately. They also came with a Getrag 5-speed, they came with a ZF 5-speed, they came with a ZF 6-speed in a few models. The 330, they have a ZHP model, which has some, I think it has different cams and it revved up fast. It's basically like a little baby M3. Things are super cool. These cars came with 4 different body styles. You could have gotten the sedan, the most common 4-door. You got the coupe, which is the CIs. The coupes are pretty sick. They're like a little bit more expensive, but if you can find a coupe that's relatively priced, then I say go on it. You got the convertibles, which is basically a CI, but it's convertible, weigh a little bit more. They got the power roof, still pretty sweet. I've owned those before, and it's a good time. And lastly, you had the option to get a wagon. These cars came in a fucking wagon. E46 wagons are elite in my opinion. Basically a 4-door, but big old wagon butt. You could fit all sorts of stuff. A lot of those are all-wheel drive too. If you could find one that's rear-wheel drive, I think that's a bigger flex. I'm not too familiar with the all-wheel drive cars, but I know engine's basically the same, but it came with an all-wheel drive transmission. Some of them manual, some of them automatic, same deal. So you can configure these cars or find one that fits your needs. You can get a coupe, you can get a sedan, you can get a convertible, you can get a wagon, you could choose rear wheel drive, you could choose all wheel drive, you could get an auto, or you could get a manual. That is quite the array of different options for a car that all run in the same exact body, kinda, for the most part. So you have so many options when it comes to these cars, and they are everywhere. There were millions of these cars sold. So basically, give you a short rundown of it. 323i is a M52, and so is the 328. Those are M52 engines. 328 has slightly bigger displacement, so I think that's a 2.8 liter. The 325 came with a M54 B25, which is a 2.5 liter. And the 330 came with the M54 B30, and that is the creme de la creme when it comes to the cheap E46s. If you can find a 330 with a manual, then you're doing well. Great thing about these cars is since there were so many sold, you could go to any junkyard, and I can almost guarantee that you will find an E46 at that junkyard. Even like 5 years ago, same deal, but right now they're everywhere, they're cheap. You'll find things you need if you want to do a diff swap, if you want to trans swap it, you're tired of the automatic and you want to be banging gears. You could find parts at a junkyard. You could go on Amazon, eBay, places that are selling reputable stuff like FCP Euro. They are really good companies that are keeping these cars alive and keeping it cheap. If you buy OEM BMW parts, like, yeah, it's going to be a little bit more money, and some stuff I would buy that. But a lot of things you can fix for pennies. Okay, now let's talk about the versatility of the E46 chassis. Let's say you want to make it into a drift car. These cars are one of the very few cars that you could take to a grassroots drift event with very few modifications, or you could go absolutely crazy doing every sort of modification you can think of, and you could compete in a professional level. The chassis is just so set up for it, where I've seen people do Pro 2 competitions, even Formula Drift, something at the highest level. So for drifting, these cars fit the bill perfectly. Maybe you're a dumbass and you want to off-road an E46. I've seen that done as well. You can throw a lift kit on it, you can do a couple modifications, cut the wheel wells out, and boom, you got yourself an off-roader. You could be a track guy. Maybe you want to just have a race car and you want to do circuit racing, or if you want to do autocross. I know that there's a full spec E46 series that it's all 330 BMWs. I think they let the other ones compete too. I'm not sure, but if you're gonna do it, you might as well pick a 330. But it's basically spec Miata. It's very level playing field. You go out and you race. You could also build the most intense race car ever, put different engines in it, turbocharge the engine, do whatever you want. Speaking of turbocharging, these engines do dig turbos pretty well. Back when I owned my first car, the tuning options were very limited, but people have cracked the code, and the factory ECUs, they're actually very tunable. Maybe you're not the turbo type of guy. Maybe you want to swap an engine in. I've seen people put things from LS's, obviously, all the way to 4 cylinders inside of these cars. The engine bay is massive. It's very accommodating, and honestly, it's got one of the best transmissions right off rip. There's only a few transmissions around that are very durable, that are used by professionals, that are recommended by a lot of swap companies, and the ZF 5-speed and 6-speed are one of those transmissions. Maybe you're not into modifying your car to crazy extents, or maybe you're just not a motorsport type of guy. You could always build these cars into some sick daily drivers or street cars. If you want to just bag it, you could throw it on some coilovers and nice wheels. You could be a stancy pants man with your hot boy camber and all that jazz too. And they look phenomenal. I'm really impressed with how these cars have aged too. Normally, if a car is they're freaking 25 years old. If you see a 25-year-old car, you usually know. But these cars are aging gracefully. They look very modern-esque. They've got nice curves. The only thing that's a little bulbous is the front end, but I think they are very, very aesthetically pleasing cars. So guys, check these cars out while you can. I think they're a fantastic deal. You could probably pick them up anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000. Put a couple $100 into little repairs and you have yourself a very, very solid car. So I talked about how cool these cars are throughout the video, and then I went and sold that E46 to a friend. Thought it would be a little hypocritical if I was saying how cool cars they are and you know, how great they are for being a first car, project car, yada, 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 without actually owning one. So I went out and picked one up. Let me explain. I have too many projects. I have a problem. I need an intervention for project cars. I really do. I really do. Somebody please help me. I have too many fucking projects. This one is icing on the cake. So let me give you a rundown on this car. I picked it up for $2,600. And if you guys know cars right now, you know that is a fantastic deal for this good old unit right here. It is a 2003 BMW 330i, the I, not the CI, the I, because it's got 4 doors. It's a manual 6-speed transmission, 6 gears, not 5. Wow. And don't get me wrong, this is a smackdown deal, but it does have its problems. That's fucked. Airbag lights on. None of this works. These are fucked. That's fucked. Oh, man. Why is it always the windows, man? Well, test the other ones. Okay, that one's down. Oh, we've got one working window. Ho, 2 working windows out of 4. Not too shabby. Right here, it's hard to tell, but we have like a little imprint here. It's kind of like a, like scuffed. You must have hit something. But yeah, the paint's still good, so I think that's fixable. And that's just the issues that I know of so far. So let's go over the main problems with these cars so you guys know what to look for so you don't get screwed when you go to buy one. Pretty much the most important thing you have to check on these cars before you pull the trigger and buy it is you want to check the rear subframe. They're notorious for cracking if they've been driven hard. Where the subframe mounts to the chassis, it is prone to getting ripped out. It's definitely fixable. I've had to do it in the past and I've seen it done plenty of times, so I didn't check this one. So yeah, you guys get to see firsthand if I got screwed or not, because I didn't check when I went to go buy the car. This is the rear subframe of the car, and this is where you need to check when you're going to buy one. There's 4 mounting points, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And where they mount to the chassis up here, they can crack and will crack over time if you drive them super hard and you don't maintain things like the bushings, like the diff bushings and everything. As the diff rocks, it'll kind of like put a lot of pressure on these parts of the floor here, and they're not exactly reinforced. So keep that in mind when you're buying a car. You want to make sure that they're not cracked. If they are cracked, that is a good negotiation tactic because it'll cost you some time and money to fix. But if it's been driven gingerly, then it's not something you really need to worry about. If you're gonna drift it, then I highly recommend you do the subframe reinforcement. It's if you're drifting, you know that working on your car is inevitable, so it's worth doing. Do that if you're gonna drive it on the track or if you're gonna drift it. It's just a nice peace of mind. Another main problem is obviously the windows. In the engine bay, there's a few things that you want to look out for. These coolant reservoirs, they're made out of plastic, and over time they will crack. So if you have any coolant leaks, it's more than likely going to be this coolant expansion tank reservoir, yada, yada, yada. They're pretty easy to replace. Just pull this off, and they clip into the radiator. They sell these on Amazon. It's basically just like a giant plastic reservoir with a float in it. Sometimes they come with the coolant level sensor already in them. If not, you just use whatever you got in there. Oh, that's kind of crusty. But yeah, there's a float, and this is low on coolant. That little thing should be floating up at me, so good to know. In the oil leak department, this is the oil filter housing, and sometimes the oil filter housing will leak. That's a pretty common area. Another oil leak is the valve cover gasket. If you see smoke coming off of the exhaust, then you know that it's leaking out of the valve cover gasket. This one looks pretty good. The oil pan might have a little bit of a leak too. That's another oil leak, but this car is relatively clean.
If you rev high enough, you don't have to worry about the valve cover gasket. Trust me, it won't catch fire.
It won't catch fire. Yeah, Ben's. You've seen Ben's car in this video. You know.
I even replaced mine and it leaked worse. So you should probably maybe use a little TV or something.
Well, you're supposed to replace these too. When you do the valve cover gasket, there's these little rubber things in there, and if you don't replace that, then yeah, that's what'll cause it to leak.
From the looks on my face, I knew that.
These boots are 20 years old, and they're made out of such a weird rubber, and they go all the way down and connect to the intake manifold down there. And if you don't replace these when they crack, this vacuum line goes into the intake, and you'll get false MAF readings, and it'll run weird and idle high or low or won't run at all. So make sure when you're looking here, you just kind of just inspect. It looks like this one's probably been replaced, honestly, or I think it'd be cracked by now. But that's just another thing to keep an eye out for. One of the last things I can think of that fails in these engine bays is the PCV system. This is just like a big valve that hides under there, and there's tubes, and sometimes it'll cause you to have like a smoking issue, or maybe they'll pop off. It connects to the dipstick too. If your E46 just starts smoking profusely and you know that the head gasket's good or anything's weird, it's just the PCV system, or the CCV, I think they call it. So that's another thing to be mindful. It's just another maintenance item that you should do after so long. And if it's been done, sick. If it's not, then it's a perfect little task to learn on. So yeah, it's obviously, there's a few things that you need to be mindful of when you go to buy these cars. Subframe, big important one. If it's ripped, then that kind of sucks. It's fixable, and if you can get the car cheap enough, then yeah, fuck it. But if it's been taken care of, then sick. You shouldn't have to worry about it. If you're gonna drive it hard, then go ahead and reinforce it. As for little shit, like the frickin' fuses will blow, the blower motor might stop working. It's all little relays and stuff that you can replace easy. There's tons of videos online. I'm hoping that there's something online for my radio / AC controls, you know. I'm sure I'll figure that out in the next episode. But yeah, relatively straightforward. The engines are super robust. They do just need some maintenance. Keep up on oil changes. Just take a peek ski at all the things, and should be ready to rock and roll. Picked this car up from the original owner's daughter. The guy had given it to her, and since 2020, she's put 900 miles on it. Despite the issues, I still think this car was a smacking deal at $2,600. It's got the M-Tech 2 package. It's got all sorts of fancy shit. It's got the nice headlights, the heated interior, the 6-speed manual, the M54 B30. Whew. My plan is to try and turn this car into a daily. I haven't had a daily in a shit long time, so I think this is the move. I've been trying to daily Georgie, the $100 Miata, and it is fucking awful. I've been driving my truck for the past 4 years, and it's been treating me well, but at the same time, would be sick to be able to throw a couple people in the back seat and, you know, cruise around in style. So, get this car all situated. Fucking, oh man, I'm so nervous that the mice got into it, and they fucked up the AC, like the climate control and the radio. Well, whatever, fucking thing runs mint, so we'll be all right. And I think the transmission probably costs about half is what I paid, so we're doing well. So let me know what you guys think. Do you think this is a good buy in 2024? Do you think there's better options for a project car around the same price point? I know there is, but I want to hear what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below, what is the best project car that you think you could buy for under $3,000? Thanks for watching, everybody. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.